It's been 93 years since the Great Depression, but so far in 2022, there has been a stock market crash, bond market crash, a crypto crash into a crypto bank run, and the Phillies were still in the World Series, but this time with the Houston Astros winning. How does this go-round differ from other American economic downfalls from the past?
If you look at every U.S. recession, well, since World War II, you'll see two things always happen. The GDP, the measure of economic output, goes down, and unemployment goes up.
For most Americans, when do you feel a recession? It's when you're still worrying about your job.
Now let's look at today. The GDP is going down. Even the head of the Federal Reserve says a recession is
certainly a possibility.
But the unemployment rate, it's actually falling. More people are getting jobs, not losing them.
We don't know if it's a recession. What we can say is that if it is one, it's not like anything we've ever seen before.
Here's why. The reason the GDP and unemployment are always together is because they feed on each other. When businesses lay off workers, people spend less money, which means businesses make fewer profits and lay off workers. A recession can begin at any of these points, and in 2022, people could cut back on spending. Just look at consumer sentiment, a measure that weighs how people are feeling about the economy and whether they plan to spend money soon. Generally, when people respond that they feel more pessimistic, a recession follows. And right now, they're feeling about as good as during the Great Recession in 2008, thanks to inflation. Not a great sign for the GDP.
If people are frustrated by high inflation, if they think inflation is going to stick around for a while, they might pull back, convince companies to cut back, and that leads to worse outcomes for the economy.
But businesses are in a different place than past recessions. This chart shows the average corporate profit margin. In the past, profits were in the single digits, leading into several recessions, including 2001.
That was a business-driven recession where companies overinvested. They decided they had to cut back in order to rebuild their profit margins, and that led us right into a recession. So are we back in one of those cycles? In some ways, it doesn't look like that because profit margins are so high right now.
Not only are corporate profits in double digits, but the amount of cash they have is close to $4 trillion. Analysts say that's a significant downturn buffer. Companies have an incentive to not lose any workers because many are having problems finding workers in the first place. It's a really unique time in the job market. The labor force participation rate is as low as it's been in 40 years. And it isn't all due to the pandemic. The rate has been declining for a long time. You can see it in the unfilled job rates too. As more people leave the labor force, the more job positions become available. Add in a pandemic, and that's a lot of jobs.
11 million jobs are out there that they just can't find people to fill. Now, to put that in perspective, if you look back at, say, 2019, when the economy was considered to be exceptionally strong, unfilled job openings were 7 million. So, like here we are talking about a downturn in the economy, and we have 4 million more jobs open than we had even at the height of the last expansion. So you have to ask yourself the question, why is that? Why is that happening? One answer is that there's generational change happening in the economy. We have millions of baby boomers who are retiring. So there's just not as many workers out there. It's also been the case that there's just been really strong demand for goods and services, in part because of all the stimulus that was pumped into the economy during the pandemic. And so that combination of labor shortages and strong demand created this really robust job market.
And it's this robust job market that could make a 2022 recession, if one develops, so different. After past recessions, there was what was called jobless recoveries, where GDP began to grow back, but companies continued to lay off workers.
Right now, we're seeing a mirror image of that, where the economic output is contracting and companies are still hiring. It's what I'm calling a jobful downturn.
But how long could an economic downturn really be job-full?
This is unsustainable, right, to have economic output contracting at a time when companies are hiring. So one of two things has to happen. Either the economy adjusts and companies start expanding again, or the economy keeps contracting, economic output keeps contracting, and companies say, whoa, we're over our skis and we've got to cut jobs. One of those two things is going to happen. We just don't know which of the two.
No recession has ever looked exactly like another. And if there's a recession in 2022, it won't look like anything we've seen before either.
Now that the problems of the American economy have been laid out, could there be a possible solution within the symbolism? All the clues compiled may lead to an answer that may save America from more destruction, but this pathway has been demonized and disliked for at least the last few decades. For America to turn the economy around, the government may have to resort back to being a domestic oil producer. While the U.S. exports most of its oil, leaving domestic wells untouched, that may have to change to once again stimulate the American economy. Carbon capture and storage, CCS, involves capturing, transporting, and storing greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuel power stations, energy-intensive industries, and gas fields by injecting the captured greenhouse gases back into the ground. On the surface, carbon capture and storage is a great idea. Maybe it's a great idea all around. But when following the money of this growing industry, it is apparent that all the big oil conglomerates are behind carbon capture and storage and its rollout, which means big oil isn't going anywhere. They are just controlling the tides of the new world. They can still pump their fossil fuels, but now they will just store it and put it underground. But could this save the US market? This matrix has never been about fixing problems at its core, but using temporary band-aids as solutions and creating a new monetary outlet. While the tech industry continues to spiral out of control, it may be time for commodities to shine once again.
Called pump jacks, oil horses, oil derricks, these large metal structures are crucial to supplying the US and ultimately the world with its oil needs.
Texas pump jack and black gold saves both equals 43 in the reduction cipher, much like hard times. The acronym for Houston, HOU, Astros 2022 equals 43 in the reduction cipher. Houston has been called the oil and gas capital of the world, with petroleum being the most popular energy source on Earth. Was this by accident? How about the United States Strategic Petroleum Reserve is at a 38-year low, emphasis on 38, while one of the biggest vaults of SPR oil is stored just 70 miles away from Houston.
Until the SPR is refilled, federal inventories are at a 38-year low. This patch of land, about 70 miles outside of Houston, Texas, doesn't look like much. But if you zoom in, these little rectangles sit above a powerful economic and political tool. Just underground is a network of caverns full of oil, part of the U.S.'s Strategic Petroleum Reserve, or SPR. Since March, President Biden has been tapping into it in a big way.
The Department of Energy will release another 15 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
Altogether, the administration will have released 180 million barrels in 2022, the largest drawdown from the SPR ever. Releases from the SPR can help calm oil traders by injecting more crude supplies into global markets. Right now, oil supplies are tight, causing high prices. By taking oil from the reserves and selling it to traders and refiners, Biden is increasing supply in an effort to lower prices at the pump, because gasoline prices are largely determined by oil prices. Pumping from the reserve, the administration says, has helped lower Americans' energy bills and stabilize markets. But some oil industry experts disagree.
When we talk about the forces that are hitting the oil market, this does very little to change the tide.